Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over my updated Balance Dataslate for Kill Team. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought you found useful and helpful. And remember, I've got an article version of this down in the episode description below, a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, as well as an affiliate link at Element Games and an affiliate link at Crossfire Games and discount code at Crossfire Games, as well as Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, today I'm talking about my updated tier list for Kill Team, where I'm going to go through it all based on the Balance Dataslate, playing some games, seeing some games, and talking to other competitive players. And before going into the Kill Team tier list itself, remember when you see the tier list, everything is ordered from oldest to newest. It's not in terms of power. And going through the tiers itself, S tier kill teams are generally the best kill teams in the game. They're very likely to win an event or go 4 wins and 0 losses. They're basically the best kill team in the game. They have hardly any or no bad matchups and are just incredibly reliable. Then you've got A tier kill teams who are effectively just a bit weaker than S tier kill teams. They're very likely to go 3 wins and 1 loss. Will win an event, can win an event, but not as good as S tier kill teams, and generally their bad matchups are the S tier kill teams, or they may have more bad matchups from lower in the tiers or in the same tier. Then you've got B tier kill teams who are very likely to go 3 wins and 1 loss, or could go 2 wins and 2 losses. Now they're pretty good, but more middle of the road kill teams, and can just suffer because they have more bad matchups and are weaker when it goes into the meta. And then you have C tier kill teams who are very likely to go 2 wins and 2 losses, or can go 3 losses and a win. They're okay kill teams, but just suffer into the meta and have quite a lot of bad matchups. And then you have D tier kill teams who are generally the worst kill teams in the game, very likely to go 3 losses and 1 win, or even 4 losses, just a lot of bad matchups and have general mechanical issues that make them struggle into the rest of the meta. But remember, this is all a guide, so the more you specialize and dedicate yourself to a kill team, or if you're more experienced, you won't really need to follow this tier list. It's all subjective when it comes down to it. But the reason I make it is to kind of help you either decide what you want to play or what matchups you need to focus on and prepare on when it comes to preparing for tournaments, because you can go oh, my kill team's in B tier, but I have to watch out for all these A tier and S tier teams, and this is what I need to prepare for. So it's just more of a helpful tool as well as some fun. But let's get on with it. So starting off in the D tier, we have Hunterclade. So Hunterclade issues, while they're imperatives, one per game, one of them once per game will not have its downsides, and technically your anti-shooting doctrine got a bit better. The problem is this kill team is too honest. Once again, you are the only kill team that has downsides to your main rules. And the issue is, if everyone also had downsides when their main effects were in play, it would be fine. But Hunterclade is the only team to suffer from this downside, and that really locks them in place. Because when only one of your rules for the turning point works, without any downside, you have to really commit that turning point. And it just makes them very hard to play. I really wish all their imperatives didn't have their downsides the first time they use them, but I guess maybe Games Workshop is worried about them becoming the ultimate flex team, because they have really good melee and close range power from their assassins, as well as good shooting from their rangers. But at the moment, they're one of the weaker kill teams for me in the game, just because of how bad their own faction rules are. Then we have Hyrotech Circle. So Hyrotech Circle have gone all the way down from S tier to D tier, and the issue is because they now heal back with 1 wound instead of D3 plus 1, and then they heal D3 plus 1. So they at best come back with 5 wounds, which means your normal warriors come back maybe uninjured, whereas your main stuff is not going to come back uninjured. And the other issue is, while all your cryptex took a nerf, the fact that Technomancer was already healing once per turning point and then went from 3d3 to 2d3 means the final time it was actually going to be useful, it now isn't, and locks you only into the Chronomancer. Because despite having a reduced range nanomine, you still have that long range teleport and have a lot of power. But the problem is the team is very unforgiving now. while Tesla weaves need to be reined in, the issue is if your opponent pushes you too hard, you will kind of just fall over and get overwhelmed and have no real way to reliably counteract back. Hopefully they find a way to find a better middle ground for the team, but at the moment the team is just not viable for me in tournaments. Way too hard to play. Vespid, despite receiving a lot of buffs, you now have unlimited communion points, they're in D tier for me. The fundamental issue with Vespid, they are a 2 APL team with no melee. They really need an option to burn a communion point to go to free APL. Because they're only 2 APL, it means they can't reposition and dash and shoot, so their threat range is effectively 8 inches. So as long as you stay just out of 8, the Vespid player can't engage with you unless they, you fall into their range or they activate last and then win initiative and get the upper hand. So they're very difficult to play. They are incredibly fun, but even then they still need like another Vespid operative because they have no dedicated melee. So if they didn't have dedicated melee but had ways to modify APL, that would be fine, but they're in the worst of both worlds. Now that they get more use out of their piercing is great and their drone gives a lethal 5-up bubble, but at the moment, like as I said, really fun kill team to play, just way too hard to play competitively. Then in C tier, we start off with Pathfinders. Pathfinders technically didn't like how strong Elites were, and Elites being nerfed slightly helps, but they're still not in the best zone, right? Pathfinders are in this really weird space where they're kind of hemmed in by the inability to get marker lights out reliably. So I really hoped they would have gotten the ability to use high intensity marker lights twice per turning point, but unfortunately as they can't, they kind of sit where they are. Now, they kind of still rely on Shazlar spam, which is just weird. But at the moment, Pathfinders occupy a weird space where maybe if they get buffed, they might dominate the game. But I feel like they can be buffed in a way that doesn't break them. But at the moment, they're in this weird spot in C tier. Going down from A tier, but they were effectively S tier, to C tier are Novitiates. So the big change with them is now their damage negation only kicks in when they're on objectives, and when they heal, they only heal D3 instead of D3 plus the number of faith points you spend. Because the issue is, Novitiates are more fragile now. Your damage negation only works against A normal. It's not as good. But the issue is they were too unkillable before, to the point where you had to do 9 damage in 2 hits to kill them. Now you kind of have to be smarter when you play Novitiates. They're still really good and they do a lot of damage, but whereas before you could run into a point, shoot someone and then just stand there for the rest of the game, now when you do that you're very likely to die in return, so you have to plan where you do your trades and actually trade instead of just going, I'm just going to move up and you're going to lose. They're still really good, but a lot more fragile, which pushes them down, so you have to be a bit more careful when you play. Gellerpox got a lot of buffs, but remain in C tier for me. The issue is, while they've got more ability to play with their faction ability, the main issue is the fact that your Nightmare Hulk's a 5-inch move, and you don't get that free dash with Drawn to the Hum anymore. Because while it's great that Revoltingly Resilient works on a 4-up, you're still actually likely to die to dedicated gunners and melee operatives, because, power weapons will still carve through you as well as plasma guns and melter guns. But with everyone being able to make great walls with like razor wire and barricades, especially razor wires put in the correct position, will just shut down that flank for your entire kill team. So you can't really engage as much and you're not as durable as you used to be, but they're still fun. The issue is if you make them too tough, they just don't die. And it would be really nice if they just had Drawn to the Hum, but at the moment, Gellerpox are solely in C tier down to their mobility. Now we have Kazakin. They've effectively unchanged, and the issue with Kazakin is while elite kill teams now are vulnerable to all their piercing weapons, because when they shoot ready operatives they can get severe, they will hit on freeze, they're just a weird kill team. They technically got a nerf, but it was a buff because it now makes them better outside of Inquisition, but oddly they're still better in Inquisition. So it's really difficult. I actually think they will do better as this meta plays out for 3 months, because now they can actually kill Marines, but they don't like Horde teams or Eldari teams. So it's going to be a very weird spot, but I think Kazakin are in a difficult situation because they finally got hit in on freeze and they didn't really do anything for the team. But maybe now that elites have to be scared of them and respect them, they should do better. So like all of that, I've left them in C tier. Next we have Exaction Squad. Now Exaction Squad are a great control team and actually do really well into hordes, but despite elites being nerfed slightly, they still lose to elites because their piercing shotgun only works once per turning point into specifically elites, which is very weird. Well, teams with 3-up saves. So while they're very, very solid, they still get overwhelmed by elites, which isn't great. And Eldari teams kind of do a number on exaction. So while they got no buffs, and I don't think they actually do need to change, the meta around them needs to change more. It's this, like, they're kind of in this weird Kazakin spot where exaction have so many rules now and are really good. The issue is just the meta around them. Scout Squad are also in C tier. Now they do a 6th forward scouting instead of 5 and get a once per game comms ability with a forward scouting. They're really cool. I think they're just 1 or 2 more buffs away from being a lot more solid. The main issue, the space they occupy, while I really don't want them to get +1 operative, they may need +1 operative because Space Marines are just way more durable. And then the other issue is just like Eldari teams mess them up. So they're in a really weird spot, but they reward careful play. But that's the issue. You have to play them carefully and play them correctly. It would really help if their heavy gunners had heavy reposition instead of heavy dash. But as it stands, Scout Squad are a lot more playable, but still not that strong. Then we have Harnkin Jaeger, who are probably the best team in C tier. And this is the weirdest thing. The only thing actually bringing them down, because in this kind of meta, elites are more killable for them, which is great. And in an Eldari meta, they're amazing. They've got this damage negation, they've got 4/4 shotguns, they're 3/5 lethal 5-up in melee. What's the problem? It's their attack ops. They have the worst selection. Seek and Destroy and Infiltration is generally quite bad unless you're a massive horde team. And the problem, or you're an elite kill team, and because Jaegers are so slow, they can't really score reliably from their attack ops. So you're kind of averaging 3 points a game. And the issue is, when you're on that such deficit for your attack ops, it really messes the team up. Like, if they would just recon and infiltration, this team would be amazing. Like, it's so bizarre that their tac op selection is holding them back so much. But when you're conceding so many points on the tac op, it means you have to now rely on making the crit op your primary or the kill op, which is incredibly risky. And because of all of that, while you may like outnumber your opponent and may like just go ahead on the kill op, your opponent's going to be reliably scoring well on their tac op and doing well on the crit op, to the point where while you may have gotten board control, it's at the cost of everything else. So unfortunately, as it stands, Harnkin Jaeger are in C tier. Then we have Brood Brothers. They're a really solid horde team. They're hit on 4s and they have lots of rerolls. But the main issue is they still fall down to hyper-aggression, and a lot more teams are now more hyper-aggressive, especially with the introduction of the kill-op, which really suffers for Brood Brothers. Now, they're not horrible, they're just solid, and the issue is they were the best kill team last edition, now they're just kind of alright. They are very prone to being weak to melee, so you kind of have to invest in building great walls of equipment to slow people down. But the problem is your opponent is eventually going to get to you and start quite quickly killing you, especially when elite teams are still going to be great into you. So Brood Brothers aren't bad, they're just fine, which is okay, but at the moment that keeps them in C tier. Now starting off B tier, we have Death Corps of Krieg. I'm really hyped for their changes. I think they're perfect in B tier now. With Siege Warfare, they go to Accurate 1 in addition to Saturate, and if you take 3 troopers instead of 4, you make Saturate 3, so now you'll have Accurate 1 and Saturate, and then you've also with your orders got Ceaseless on everything. So you're Ceaseless Accurate 1, which means you've got Accurate 1 Ceaseless Cracks, Accurate 1 Ceaseless Plasma Melter Grenade Launcher, and then also an Accurate Bombardment, which is really, really funny and amazing. Now, the main issue you have to worry about is the kill team's lost its ability to roadblock with Death and Atonement, because before, if someone charged you, you would Death and Atonement, tie them up, but now they can just charge, kill, and then shoot, which is what elites will do. And especially if some teams kill your melter early, you kind of lose a lot of punch, especially once your cracks are gone. So you're relying on hitting hard and hitting early. But Death Corps occupy a really interesting shooty aspect for a horde team. So I think they're going to do really good into the current meta. Then we have Commandos, who I think have gone down from A tier to B tier. While they like the change to elites, it didn't really affect them too much. And the issue is with the rise of Eldari teams really do a number on Commandos. As I said, you know, Eldari teams have a lot of access to power weapons, crits, and rending, which really gets behind and through all of the commando defenses. So Commandos are kind of like just okay, you know. The other issue is the change of the anime vantage point on Vocus, meaning now it's not as free for you to get 9 points from surveillance with the grot, but you can still do it with the mobility. But I think they're just fine in B tier, which is good. Elucidity and Starstriders have gone down from A tier to B tier. Now, while elites have gotten a bit more vulnerable to their piercing weapons, Elite still mess them up, and the issue is once you find your asset, you're kind of relying on your Elect 2 Maester and your Assassin to reliably kill an Elite, which is incredibly dicey. And the issue is Eldari teams do quite well into Star Striders. So Star Striders aren't bad, their weakness is melee, but then also you've got Felgor, which feels like an impossible matchup into Star Striders. I don't know how Star Striders are ever supposed to beat that matchup. But at the moment, they're solidly in B. Still really good, finesse, but the issue is they're just weak in melee, which has always been their problem, and now a lot more teams will rush them down. Now in B tier, we've got Breachers who have come up from C tier. So the thing about Breachers is they occupy a really nice defensive playstyle with Breach, because while they're within their territory, not wholly within, Brace is always active even if they move, reposition or charge, which is amazing. So this really helps when you're playing on Gallodark, so you can play hyper defensively, and you know, with Brace now working from 3 damage instead of 4, it's kind of giving you an extra wound, and you get a free attack or defense order, which is really neat. So I think Breachers occupy a really nice defensive playstyle as a Horde team. They're not like incredibly tanky with high saves and high wounds. They just have a lot of people with 7 wounds and a 4-up save, which is nice. They're this team that will slowly chip you down, and I think as long as you can learn to play this new playstyle, it'll be really fun and rewarding, which is nice. These are the kind of buffs I like because it occupies a new playstyle we generally haven't seen in a nice way that does have downsides, because if you push up too aggressively, you lose that defensive effect. So as a result, they're in B tier for me. Next, we have Farstalker Kinban. So Farstalker Kinban were almost in A tier for me. They do have balance now instead of accurate, and then if they've got prey, so if they stay stationary, they get severe and ceaseless. The only issue is they are very CP intensive and their tac ops aren't amazing. It would have been really nice if they get trophy twice per game instead of once, because reliably you probably want to pick plant beacons, but with your 3 spare operatives, you're taking either 1 warrior or 2 hounds. But if you're going like plant beacons, you're then taking 2 warriors and a hound, which means when you lose a key operative, you lose the efficiency in your tac ops. And, you know, Farstalkers are still an amazing team, but because they're so CP intensive and their tac ops aren't as reliable as you'd think, I'll put them in B tier for now. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up in A tier. They are a very good team, but just really hard to play. And as I said, the problem is if you start losing Kroot too quickly, you're going to find out, especially if you've taken stuff like CP, like action point intensive tac ops, you're going to quickly run out of ways to reliably score them. But at the moment, Kroot are in a really good spot, and they actually like playing into most Eldari teams. They were already good into elites and they're better, so they're solid B tier for me, almost in A tier. Then we have Chaos Cult. Their main buff is they can now make 2 torments per turning point, and mutants and torments go to accurate 2 instead of accurate 1. The only issue is if your torments die turning point 2 and you don't make any more mutants, you will not have torments again until turning point 4, and if your opponent is damaging your mutants early, you will have weakened torments. So what you're going to have to do is play a little bit defensively and then try and set up kills to turn devotees into mutants turning point 2 and 3. But otherwise, they're a lot better. They're still burst damage, like torments can still do a ton of damage, especially with accurate 2 now. But you have to still be careful. If you lose your torments turning point 2, you're kind of stuck in the air turning point 3 if you haven't already made any mutants. So you have to play very careful. But otherwise, I think they occupy a nice space in B tier. Now for our first Eldari team, we have Mandrakes. They didn't really see any changes. The biggest change for them was that the anime vantage point on Vocus. Now, the thing is, while you can be charged, you still can spend a CP to fight first, but if your opponent has enough operatives to send up there, that really hems in your ability to reliably score 9 points from surveillance, and you don't have the free mobility like the Hookshot Grut does. But Mandrakes are still very solid. They didn't really care about the elite changes because they were okay into elites. They're just a very finessey team, and the worst thing for them is actually seeing more Eldari teams who will actually be able to counter them more reliably. But as it stands, Mandrakes are a solid B tier team. If you play them perfectly, they are almost S tier, but they require so much finesse, it's not great. But they're still a solid kill team. Then we have Tempestus Aquilans, who are still in B tier. They should be a lot better. The cool thing is now they've got Hot Drop, which can work from vantage points, turning point 3 and 4, which is really nice. But they always have now basically they have piercing 2 and 1 against all the elite kill teams. So they should be better at hunting elite kill teams, and they're kind of okay until Eldari teams. It just becomes who gets the kills first. So I can definitely see Tempestus Aquilans becoming more viable. They're in the same boat as Kazakin, but the issue is Aquilans have more rerolls and more mobility. So it's kind of like if you're playing Kazakin, you would play Inquisition or Aquilans. And with Aquilans mobility, I think they should do really, really well. It won't surprise me if they end up in A tier. They should benefit the most from all these changes. Then we have Angels of Death, who have remained unchanged. Well, they've gone down from S tier to B tier, but they are just in B tier. I didn't think they're in A tier yet. But the main thing that makes them quite weak is just how bland their warriors are, getting no extra effects compared to other warriors in the game. The great thing though, into other elite kill teams, their Stalker bolt rifles now will always be piercing 1, which is really, really good. And they actually do great into other Eldari teams because of their tilting shields. But at the moment, I still think they're kind of a bit weak, and they also don't like the change of the vantage point because now you just charge the Eliminator, who will fall to like dedicated melee. But at the moment, I think Angels of Death are solid B tier. They could move up into A tier, but they occupy a great space as a starter kill team. Finally, closing out B tier, we have Wrecker Crew. So the issue with Wrecker Crew are amazing if you always roll 6s. If you play games, and you will play games where you don't roll 6s, they will fall apart. So this is the issue. They have amazing melee, like their melee operatives are really, really good. But when you don't generate those Wrecker points, your only reliable way to generate Wrecker points is engaging with your leader, which can end up losing your leader and your kill team like crumbling. The other thing is their tac ops aren't great. Seek and destroy and security is quite risky. And if you're playing security, you're generally falling back on either take ground or contain. And contain is really rough. You're also vulnerable to stun grenades, which can eliminate all your bonuses. But if you get going, you get going really well. So, you know, it's if you position well. But then the other weakness is you've got 2 bomb squigs, and from this, after they activate from turning point 1, they're stuck on engage. So you're either keeping them out of sight or just running them up. And when they die, you go down to 6 activations. But when they work, they're amazing. They've got lots of blast and they're lots of fun. But I think that's why they're solidly in B tier. They use cracks really well if they have Wrecker points. But if you don't have Wrecker points, you still actually have really amazing melee units and a lot of ways to control and move up the board. Starting off in A tier, going down from S tier, we have Legionary. So Legionary, they're weird. So the thing about Legionary is what happened was now Fickle Fates gives Ceaseless instead of Severe against ready operatives. But when you combine that with warriors, they gain Relentless. So now you have Relentless crack grenades. So Legionaries, while they're more vulnerable and they're not as tanky as they used to be, they are now more accurate when it comes to shooting, which is really bizarre. So you can have situations where they can like reposition and dash a Zinch and then double shoot with a rending Severe Ceaseless gun, or they can, like, as an undivided warrior, charge up, kill someone, and then fire someone with their, like, ceaseless shooting. It does occupy interesting aspects. For example, you can now take a Slash Melter, which will have ceaseless, or an undivided Melter, which will have relentless. So Legionary really occupied this new range of short-range, killy firepower, while still being an amazing melee team. They are still very more of a glass cannon now. They don't heal as much. Quicksilver speed only really works when they activate and only works at long range with the Slanesh effect. But I wouldn't be surprised to see more mix of like Slanesh and Undivided teams. But Legionary are still amazing. One of the best A-tier kill teams, but no longer the best team in the game. Blooded remain in A-tier. They're a great kill team. They love the changes to elite kill teams and are pretty solid into Eldari teams as well. They occupy one of the best spots as an A-tier kill, well, as a horde kill team. And considering where they're positioned at the moment, they should do really well. Like, they can finally play in a stable meta. And as a Blooded player, you're going to have a great time. They haven't really changed too much, but they're just nice and dependable with their Blooded tokens. So it should be really good for Blooded. Phobos Strike Team remain in A tier. I thought about boosting them to S tier, but the issue is they are the only elite kill team which has to be played perfectly. You make a mistake and your 12 Wood Marines, despite being 7-inch movement, will fall apart. Especially with the rise of Eldari teams, it means a lot of Eldari teams will kill you with a single warrior in combat because a lot of them have power weapons, which isn't good for your Phobos. Now, if you play them perfectly, they are really, really strong, but because you need that constant perfect play, like even in the longest form tournament, you will make a mistake, and that's what keeps them down from S tier. But otherwise, they're really, really good. Omni Scramble is great, Reavers are really good, and their Incursors, Ignoring Obscuring, are amazing as well. Wormblade are also one of the more powerful horde teams at the moment, with the ability when they switch from Conceal to Engage getting Ceaseless. It means that Kill Team has tons of rerolls everywhere. They do play a bit more honest this season, which makes them one of the weaker kill teams in A tier, but they're still a big threat. The fact they can spend a CP to force crits and spend a CP to switch back to conceal means you can still kind of have this constant train of ceaseless operatives. You do have to kind of plan your engagements to make sure you don't make sure everyone's engaged by the end of the turning point unless you've wiped out your opponent, but they offer all this nice reliability in a decent horde package. You still have to be careful with your co-agents, but you can still play quite reliably now, and they like the changes to elites. They're okay into Eldari teams, but still a bit iffy, but Wormblade are in a great spot. Hand of the Archon are our first Eldari team in A tier, and they're really, really good. Like, the change to pain tokens in general, they really love, now getting pain tokens from injured operatives instead of just killing them only. They're really, really fun. They do great into other Eldari teams, and love the changes to elites, but they just lack that hint of reliability that keeps them out from S tier. But I think they're really fun to play and rewarding when you invest, but otherwise they're solid A tier. Next we have Halfkin Salvagers. They were already doing well into elites, and now elites have been nerfed. They are crazy. They actually do quite well into Eldari teams, but they still have to watch out for teams like Felgor Ravager. So it's weird. They also are not a big fan of Harlequins. Harlequins kind of mess them up. But Halfkin are in a great spot. They've got the really threatening jump pack warrior, and also they have cracks that will hit on freeze with balanced and basically at least one crit every time you throw them. So Halfkin Salvagers are in an amazing spot. Really, really good tack-up choice of security and recon. So they're great where they are right now. Inquisitor agents have come down from S tier going into A tier. They are still tied for best when it comes to horde teams. The fact they still have all their really powerful ploys that haven't been changed effectively means they're ceaseless every time they're shooting or fighting at someone, and they have absolute authority that still shuts people down. Unfortunately, you're still probably only taking Kazakin, but you still have a wide selection of ancillary support. And, you know, you're limited to basically a melter gun and 2 plasma guns, but you can take a lot of piercing crits 1 weapons, which like are the heavy bolter and the hotshot volley gun. So you've got a lot of options there. And with the wide toolbox they have, they're still good. They're just have to play a bit more carefully, which is fine, but keeps them still really good. Then we have Blades of Cain, who have gone all the way from D tier to A tier. I did underestimate them. They were a lot better than I thought. And their Die Avengers have now gained balance instead of accurate when they're shooting on objectives or shooting people on objectives, which is nice. They have a lot of threat, and people have been doing really well with them in tournaments, and they kind of like the elite changes, although the elite changes didn't do much for them. The issue with Blades of Cain, they still kind of rely on, you know, getting ahead of the opponent, and the issue is now more people will be familiar with how they play. I will see their success go down, in my opinion, and they do suffer into other Eldari teams because the other Eldari teams out-activate them, which is a big problem. But they will do consistently well into elites, and I think they occupy a nice spot in A tier. Then we have Plague Marines, who were basically almost S tier and are now just holding in A tier. They didn't care about the piercing change because they were already vulnerable to piercing changes, but your icon is now a bit worse because it has to be within your territory, well, within your opponent's territory to get the free ability for the command point, but otherwise they're still solid. Like, it's still really, really good. You just have to play carefully and move up the board. You can no longer just defensively sit back and wait for your opponent to come to you. You do have to engage a bit more, which is nice. You can only heal once per turning point instead of twice, but the kill team is still really great. Lots of access to obscurity and just very resilient operatives with 14 wounds and negating damage by -1 on a 4-up or spending a CP to auto-insure it. So they're really, really good. A nice spot for a starter kill team. Very, very powerful and a great place to start for new players. Nemesis Claw were actually almost in S tier. I decided to keep them down in A tier because I actually spoke to 2 friends which I really trust and value, and I kind of agreed with them after listening to their thoughts and experiences with the team. Because the issue is, while Hand of the Archon gets rerolls against wounded operatives, as well as Nemesis Claw, Hand of the Archons have more way to set it up and can out-activate opponents more readily, whereas Nemesis Claw, effectively, if your opponent doesn't run into your poisoned objectives, you have no way to reliably chip people. So when you charge in for those big charges, you're hoping you're rolling hot, which means you're keeping CP in the bank to offset the ability when you roll poorly. And that is actually a big hindrance when you're trying to play consistently at events. Now, they do rely a lot on prescience tokens and out-activating opponents, but their TAC-op selection isn't great as well. Seek and Destroy and Infiltration isn't the best, because while Infiltration is okay into elites, because you can use prescience points to out-activate, and then last activation, reposition and dash, gather surveillance, and then if you lose initiative, you can spend a CP at the start of the next turning point to fall back to safety. That isn't the best way to play, and you're relying on Seek and Destroy into every other team that isn't an elite, which is very difficult. So for those reasons, I've kept them in A tier, but they are really, really good. They are a very good kill team. They reward you when you learn how to properly use their Vox Scream. Lots of tricks, but they lack that reliability and consistency, which is why they're in A tier. Then closing out A tier, we have Ratlings. Now, unfortunately, the reason Ratlings are so high is because they have one way to play. One very annoying way to play. This is basically hyper defensive, where you don't really engage the opponent unless they give you shots until like turning point 3 or 4. You make a big wall and obstacle course they have to try and traverse to get into your territory, then you go in for the kill. Now, the issue is this is very boring to play against and very rigid. And the problem is when more people figure out how to play into that playstyle, it will no longer come into be effective. But at the moment, it's really, really good. The other weakness is Vocus. The issue is your models are so short they can't actually see over the Vocus walls, so you have to really position your shots well, but those 3 dashes with Scarpa are amazing. Now, if you're playing in a GW tournament or a tournament using Vocus maps and then using the Games Workshop Gallowdark maps, you're in for a good time. But if you're into a tournament using Vocus and then the LVO Squad Games Gallowdark maps, or also the LVO Squad Games Vocus layouts, you're going to really struggle because you miss those wide open areas to shoot. So it's kind of tournament dependent, but Ratlings are really solid. Unfortunately, they just have a very rigid and unfriendly playstyle, but they're great in A tier. So starting off with S tier, there's been a lot of change, starting with Warp Coven. They're still in S tier. So the thing about Warp Coven, I was actually speaking to my friend Travis from Just Another Kill Team podcast, and he talked some sense into me, because originally I had Nemesis Claw in S tier and Warp Coven in A tier, but then I realized, after speaking to him and thinking it over and playing a game, yeah, Warp Coven are still S tier. They're not the best kill team, but they've gone from the best to one of the best. They still have a lot of reliability in defense with Fate as my weapon, because if you roll a 1 or a 2, you can just turn your opponent's key crits or key dice into 1 or 2s, and you can still do your reposition, dash, shoot, and then teleport dash with Capricious Plan if you're a sorcerer, but it does mean you're more CP intensive. Now, the kill team is still flexible, but they're more honest flexible. They're no longer hyper flexible. But because they have all these tools, Zangles are still good, they're no longer insane, and you still have really tough operatives. They're great, right? They may probably need some more nerfs. It wouldn't be surprising if they settled down into A tier, but at the moment, I still think they're the best Space Marine kill team, especially as they take security and recon, which are amazing archetypes, especially for this kind of team, and can go wide into Eldari teams, taking multiple Zangor, which still do well into Eldari. So Warp Coven is still great. Unfortunately, their biggest downside is if for Fate itself is my weapon, you keep rolling 3-ups, because then your opponent just goes like, oh, thank you, you can't turn any of my dice. But otherwise, yeah, Warp Coven, S tier. Void Dancer Troop remain in they went A tier, they're now S tier, they're probably the best faction in the game. Out of all the big 6 factions that got nerfed, Void Dancer Troop just got slapped on the hand, where their Mirror of Minds now has an 8-inch range, which is great, I guess. The issue is Void Dancer Troop were overperforming and have been overperforming and weren't really touched, and are now the best team maybe in the game. They're okay into other Eldari teams, especially into Blades of Cain, but they love hunting elites now. They're just really hyper mobile, they have lots of tricks, they're very command point efficient because their players can do a free ploy once per game per turning point, and they have lots of threat range with lots of balance for shooting or melee. They're just really, really good, really reliable, lots of ways to trigger their effects. Now they have severe blades. They're just a crazy team. So we're going to see Void Dancer Troop everywhere. It's Void Dancer Troop Spring. It's just clowns as far as the eye can see. Then for S tier, we also have Corsair Void Scarred. They've gone up to S tier because, well, elites were hemming them in, and with elites now not being able to not ignore their piercing 2 and piercing 1, they're having a great time, because like Hand of the Archon, they have 2 piercing 2 weapons, and they have a lot of power weapons. But they have effectively 2 piercing 2 weapons, a piercing 1 weapon, and then just crazy stuff. Like, I hope people are ready for the Starstorm Duelist, Turning Point 2, or maybe even Turning Point 1, to walk into your face, kill someone with a melter, and then kill someone with a Shuriken pistol. If you're an Eldari team or Horde team, or if you're an elite team, you're just going to lose a Marine. Oddly, they really worry about Angels of Death because of tilting shields, but it's that weird dichotomy, you just shoot them instead. You still have the amazing Shade Runner who can teleport through Gallowdark walls, and in Gallowdark you can be hyper defensive, setting up these reactionary webs if your opponent moves up too close, and you can still do it on open as well. So Corsair Void Guard are in a great spot, everyone can do a free dash, you're a hyper mobile team, lots of tricks, lots of shooting, lots of melee, what's not to like? Then closing out S tier we have Felgor Ravager. Now, while the elite change didn't really do much for them, it made the other teams more popular. So the thing about Felgor, look, you love fighting Eldari teams. Eldari just can't beat you, like, unless you like unless they find a way to reliably hem you in with the Great Wall of Equipment. But otherwise, Felgor are an amazing team. They gatekeep so much of the meta because of Frenzy. You don't really care about the nerf they give to your Psyker for the Super Conceal bubble because it just requires visibility, but it's only a 3-inch bubble anyway. Well, it's not like you weren't visible anyway. So until Frenzy gets changed, you're amazing. The thing you actually have to watch out for are elites, because elites are still going to be everywhere. They're not gone. And the issue is elites will just counteract and kill your frenzied goats. So you're going to have to play more carefully, and especially when you're playing into wider teams. While you're probably going confirm kill all the time, you're going to have to diversify your attack op selection a bit. But Felgor are in a really good spot. As I said, we're kind of in a rock, paper, scissors meta. So while like Eldari teams will hunt the elites, you hunt the Eldari teams, but then the elite teams hunt you. But generally, as more elite teams should be repressed, it's a great time to be a goat. So there it is for the Kill Team tier list. As I said, we've had a lot of changes. Once again, you know, Hunterclade is kind of still in D tier. Hyrotech Circle go down from S tier all the way down to D tier. They've just lost so much. Despite being severely toxic, they've just kind of been hit too hard. Void Dancer Troop have gone up, you know, they're now in S tier. Warp Coven is still in S tier, but are a lot weaker. Legionary are still in A tier. Novitiates go down to C tier, and Inquisitor Agents are in A tier. But now we also have Blades of Cain in A tier. It's effectively an Eldari meta. Although elites aren't gone. We still have elites, they're just going to still be quite popular, they're just not going to be dominating. So I don't think elites are gone, elites are still there, right? They're like, as I said, Legionary occupy this really terrifying space of being a crazy short-range shooty team, like with relentless cracks and stuff. Very, very crazy. But we're kind of like rock, paper, scissors. As I said, Eldari teams will be very good, hunting elite teams as well as a lot of other teams. But then you have Felgor who will be hunting the Eldari, and then elite teams kind of keeping Felgor in check. So you have this weird dichotomy of a meta. But the other cool thing is that the tiers are super close. The last 3 months, like the S tier was basically untouchable. If you weren't in the A tier, even in the A tier, you didn't really have a chance. But the tiers are so close. Like, as I said, Nemesis Claw are almost in S tier, and Warp Coven are just in S tier. Like, the tiers are so close. The only downside when it comes to D tier, because it's so difficult to play those kill teams. But if you look at it, with A to C tier, most teams are evenly spread, with only 4 teams in S tier and 3 teams in D tier. So in my opinion, we have a really close and fun meta that is going to represent player skill more than how powerful your kill team is, which is really, really nice, and that's how I enjoy kill team being played and designed. Obviously, there's still some stuff I'd like being fixed. I think Void Dancer Troop and Felgor are a big design problem, but we'll see what happens in 3 months. They may just naturally come into being checked, or when it comes to the next Balance Dataslate, it'll be fixed then. But I'm really hyped and looking forward to the next meta. It's really fun. I've already played a lot of games and it's been really, really good. I've had a lot of fun with the new team I've been playing, and most people are playing on new teams as well. So I can't wait to see how it shapes up. I've already seen a lot of tournaments which have been very interesting, and I can't wait to see what everyone else does at home. But remember, that's pretty much it from me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. I'll have an article version of this in the episode description below. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, and affiliate at Element Games and Crossfire Games and a discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. I'm just going to quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the crew, I have Tom, Supercow, Sam, Nick, Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Lucas, Jeremiah, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dave Meatsworld, Darcy, Dan, Dad of Goldens, Chris, and Morphium. And then for my veterans of the crew, I have Samja and Mark. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, that's my new tier list out of the way. As I said, I do them quarterly after Balance Dataslate. Been talking to lots of players, playing games and seeing how tournaments have been going. It's still a bit early, but I think this is a very solid look at the meta. Some things might change, but I'm very confident with how it is. But I'm also interested to see how you think the meta is. Do you think it's better or worse? And what you're looking forward to as well. But remember, you stay away from tier 15. And no matter what happens with the tiers, you always have a chance to win, as long as you can roll a crit. Oh yeah, also I'm an egg now.